They always told us the first contact with alien life would come from the stars. They were wrong. It came from beneath. The screams echoed through the sterile corridors of Threshold Research Facility as Dr. Marcus Reid sprinted toward Containment Lab 7. Emergency lights pulsed crimson, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for him with each frantic step. The facility's AI repeated its emotionless warning over the intercom. Containment breach in progress. All personnel evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. But Marcus couldn't evacuate. Not yet. Not while Eliza was still inside. He skidded to a halt before the reinforced observation window, his breath fogging the glass as he pressed against it. Inside the lab, overturned equipment and shattered sample containers created a scene of scientific apocalypse. And there, in the center of the chaos, was Eliza Chen, brilliant xenobiologist, his former fiancée, and now something else entirely. "Eliza!" he shouted, pounding on the glass. Her body convulsed as she turned toward his voice, movements jerky and unnatural. When her face came into view, Marcus recoiled instinctively. Her skin had taken on a blue-black sheen, stretched taut over sharpened features. Bony protrusions had erupted from her forehead and jawline, forming a crown-like structure. But it was her eyes that froze the blood in his veins, luminous yellow orbs that glowed with predatory intelligence. "Cuss," she rasped, her voice layered with an otherworldly resonance. "Run!" Behind her, the containment chamber that had housed the extraterrestrial pathogen, codenamed Symbiote X-27, lay shattered, its cryogenic systems hissing useless vapor into the air. "I'm getting you out," Marcus called, already entering his override code into the security panel. "No!" The force of Eliza's scream cracked the observation glass. "It's inside me, changing me. I can feel it in my mind." She staggered forward, one clawed hand reaching toward him, while the other clutched at her temple. Blood, dark and viscous, almost black, trickled from her nose and the corners of her eyes. "Please," she whispered, a moment of desperate humanity breaking through the monstrous transformation. "Kill me before I'm not me anymore." The security panel beeped its acceptance of Marcus's code. The lab door began to slide open. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly, though terror clawed at his insides. "We'll find a way to reverse this." Eliza's transformed face twisted in what might have been a smile or a grimace. "Always the optimist," she said, her voice briefly her own again. Then her expression contorted in agony. "It's coming back. The other consciousness. Run!" The last word emerged as an inhuman shriek as she lunged forward with impossible speed, crossing the distance between them before Marcus could react. Her clawed hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground with terrifying strength. Up close, he could see the final vestiges of Eliza, the woman he had loved, fading from those alien eyes. Whatever was looking at him now wasn't human. It studied him with cold, predatory calculation. "Your mate," it said, using Eliza's voice like an ill-fitting garment. "She fights us, strong, but we are stronger." Marcus clawed at the hand crushing his windpipe, black spots dancing in his vision. "Eliza," he choked out, "I know you're in there. Fight it." Something flickered in those yellow eyes. Recognition, perhaps. The grip loosened, just enough for him to draw a ragged breath. "Marcus," Eliza's voice emerged, strained and desperate. "The syringe, on the counter, sedative, use it." With one violent motion, she hurled him toward the lab counter. He crashed against it, sending equipment scattering. His hand closed around a loaded syringe as he spun to face her. Eliza, or the thing wearing her skin, was convulsing again, hands clutching her head as two consciousnesses battled for control. "Do it!" she screamed, momentarily herself again. "Now!" Marcus lunged forward, driving the needle into her neck and depressing the plunger. For one terrible moment, her alien eyes fixed on him with pure hatred. Then the sedative took hold and she collapsed into his arms, suddenly light and fragile again, despite her transformed appearance. As facility security pounded on the outer doors, Marcus made his decision. The world wasn't ready for what Eliza had become, and he wasn't ready to lose her. Not again, not like this. Cradling her unconscious form, he whispered, "Hold on, I'm getting us out of here." What he didn't know then was that he wasn't saving Eliza from the creature. He was saving them both. 3 days earlier. "You need to see this." Eliza Chen's voice carried that rare tone of scientific awe that had always fascinated Marcus. In their 5 years together, 3 as colleagues, 2 as lovers, he'd heard it only a handful of times. It usually preceded something revolutionary. He looked up from his microscope to see her standing in his lab doorway, tablet in hand, eyes bright with discovery. Despite their complicated history, despite the engagement ring she no longer wore, his heart still skipped at the sight of her. "What am I looking at?" he asked as she handed him the tablet. "The soil samples from the Mariana Trench expedition," she said, leaning over his shoulder, close enough that he could smell the faint jasmine of her shampoo. "Specifically, what we found living in them." The tablet displayed electron microscope images of what appeared to be organic structures, complex cellular arrangements unlike anything in Marcus's extensive microbiological catalog. "These cellular walls," he murmured, zooming in, "they're not composed of any material I recognize." "Because they're not from Earth," Eliza said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Carbon-based, yes, but with molecular structures that don't match any known terrestrial organism. We're thinking a meteorite impact in the Pacific, perhaps millions of years ago. The organisms were preserved in the trench's anaerobic environment until our drilling disturbed them." Marcus looked up sharply. "They're viable after millions of years?" "Not just viable," Eliza replied, swiping to a new image. A time-lapse of the organism interacting with human cells in a petri dish. "They're symbiotic, unlike anything we've seen before. The microscopic organism in the footage appeared to merge with human cells, not destroying them, but transforming them, creating a hybrid cellular structure that retained characteristics of both." "My God," Marcus breathed. "The implications for medicine alone, tissue regeneration, cancer treatment, longevity." "Exactly." Eliza's smile was brilliant. "That's why I recommended you to head up the research team." His eyes snapped to hers. "Me? Not you?" A shadow crossed her face. "The board still doesn't fully trust my judgment after the CRISPR controversy, but they respect you. With you leading, we can ensure this discovery is used ethically." She hesitated. "If you want the position, that is." Marcus studied her face, searching for signs of resentment. The CRISPR incident had ended both their relationship and nearly Eliza's career. She had pushed to accelerate human trials of a revolutionary gene therapy. He had reported his concerns to the ethics committee. The therapy had been delayed by years. They had never fully recovered from the breach of trust. "I'll do it," he said finally, "but only if you're my co-lead. Your name first on all publications." Eliza's expression softened. "Always trying to fix things, Marcus." She shook her head. "This discovery is bigger than our past. I just want to be part of the research. The credit doesn't matter." But Marcus knew it did, to both of them. "Then welcome to Threshold Project," he said, extending his hand in a deliberately professional gesture. "Let's make history." Her hand clasped his, warm and familiar. "Without destroying ourselves in the process," she added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Neither of them could have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. By the 3rd day of research, they had learned several critical facts about the organism they now called Symbiote 327. First, it displayed clear signs of intelligence. Not consciousness as humans understood it, but a complex adaptive behavior that suggested cognitive processing beyond instinct. Second, it could only survive in human tissue for approximately 6 hours before cellular breakdown occurred. A fortunate limitation that reduced the immediate biohazard risk. And third, most significantly, it appeared to convey extraordinary benefits to the host cells during those 6 hours. Accelerated healing, enhanced cellular efficiency, and resistance to toxins and radiation. It's like it's upgrading us, Dr. Yamamoto, their cellular biologist, remarked during the morning briefing. Improving the host while it's in residence. The question is why, Marcus responded, studying the latest data. What evolutionary advantage does the symbiote gain from enhancing its host temporarily, only to cause cellular collapse later? Maybe it's not supposed to be temporary, Eliza suggested. She'd been uncharacteristically quiet during the meeting, her attention focused on a separate data set. Look at these protein markers. They indicate the symbiote is attempting to permanently alter the host DNA, but something in our cellular structure is resisting the complete integration. Marcus frowned. You're suggesting it's trying to create a permanent symbiotic relationship? More than that, Eliza said, her voice taking on an intensity that made the room fall silent. I think it's trying to evolve us. The statement hung in the air, both fascinating and disturbing. That's a significant leap, Dr. Chen, Director Hawkins said from the head of the table. The government oversight representative had been a silent presence until now, one that borders on anthropomorphizing a single-celled organism. Eliza bristled visibly. With respect, Director, we've all seen the data. X-27 displays coordination between individual cells that suggests a hive intelligence. Its attempts to modify host DNA are targeted and precise, not random mutations. It's as if it's working from a blueprint. A blueprint for what? Marcus asked quietly. Eliza met his gaze directly. For what humanity could become. Respiratory, the uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by the facility AI. Alert, anomaly detected in Containment Lab 7. Symbiote X-27 behavioral shift in progress. The team rushed to the lab where the primary samples were housed in a sealed environment. On the high-resolution displays, they could see the symbiote colonies changing, individual cells clustering together, forming more complex structures than they had previously observed. They're organizing, Eliza whispered, eyes wide with wonder. Responding to something. To what stimulus? Marcus demanded, checking the environmental controls. Nothing's changed in the containment parameters. Actually, something has, Dr. Yamamoto said, gesturing to another monitor. Us. Our presence in higher numbers seems to be exciting them. They're responding to human proximity. Director Hawkins stepped back from the observation window. I want additional containment protocols implemented immediately. If these organisms can sense human presence through sealed environments, they're not a threat, Eliza interjected forcefully. Everything we've observed indicates they benefit the host. For 6 hours, Hawkins countered, after which they cause catastrophic cellular failure. That's the textbook definition of a parasite, Dr. Chen, not a symbiote. Unless we're missing something, she insisted. The key to permanent integration must exist. We just haven't found it yet. Marcus recognized the familiar stubborn set of Eliza's jaw. It was the same expression she'd worn during their CRISPR disagreement. Brilliant, passionate, and dangerously convinced of her own hypothesis. We proceed with caution, he said firmly, a decision directed at both Hawkins and Eliza. Enhance containment protocols, but we continue the research. If Dr. Chen is right about X-27's potential benefits, we can't afford to abandon this discovery. Hawkins nodded reluctantly. 24 hours. Then I want a full risk assessment before we proceed further. As the team dispersed to implement the new protocols, Marcus noticed Eliza lingering by the observation window, her expression almost yearning as she watched the symbiote colonies pulse and shift in their sealed environment. They're beautiful, aren't they? She said when she sensed him watching her. Like looking at the next chapter of evolution. Evolution isn't always kind to the transitional species, Marcus reminded her gently. She turned to him, eyes alight with the fervor he both loved and feared. What if we don't have to be transitional? What if we could direct the change? Become something greater without losing what makes us human? You're talking about deliberate infection, Marcus said, lowering his voice. Eliza, you know that's at least a dozen ethical boundaries away from where we are now. Science has always pushed boundaries, she replied, especially when survival is at stake. Whose survival? Her answer chilled him. All of us. Haven't you seen the latest climate projections? The antibiotic resistance trends? The freshwater scarcity models? Humanity is approaching multiple extinction thresholds, Marcus. We don't have the luxury of caution anymore." Before he could respond, the facility AI interrupted again. "Alert! Unauthorized access detected in sample storage. Containment Lab 7. They exchanged alarmed glances and rushed back to the main lab. The security feed showed the impossible. The sealed inner containment door was open, and a figure in a standard lab coat was removing one of the symbiote samples. "Lock down the lab!" Marcus shouted to the security officer. "Now!" But even as the containment protocols engaged, they watched in horror as the figure deliberately broke the sample container against their own skin. When the intruder turned toward the camera, Marcus felt his blood freeze. It was Eliza, but the Eliza standing beside him, watching the same feed, whispered, "That's not possible. I'm right here." On the screen, the other Eliza smiled directly into the camera before the symbiote sample, now exposed to air, began to visibly dissolve into her skin. The facility plunged into emergency protocols as the reality became clear. Someone had breached their security using Eliza's identity, and they had just deliberately infected themselves with symbiote X-27. The beginning of the end had just been broadcast on their own security feed. The infiltrator was identified within hours as Dr. Sofia Vargas, a former colleague who had worked with Eliza on previous projects. Facial alteration technology had allowed her to bypass the initial security scans. But once inside the sealed lab, she had removed her disguise. What they couldn't determine was why. She was working with Ecogenesis, Eliza explained during the emergency briefing, referring to a radical environmental organization known for its increasingly militant stance on climate intervention. But we parted ways when their methods became too extreme. "Define extreme," Director Hawkins demanded. Eliza hesitated. They began advocating for forced population control measures, violent disruption of industrial complexes. Sophia was always the most radical voice in the group, and now she's infected herself with an alien symbiote, Marcus said grimly. "The question is, was this a suicide mission, or does she know something we don't about surviving the integration?" The answer came 12 hours later, when Sophia should have been experiencing catastrophic cellular breakdown. Instead, the security feeds showed her not only alive but transforming. Her skin darkening to a blue-black hue, her features sharpening, her eyes developing the luminous yellow glow they would later see in Eliza. "She's adapting," Eliza whispered as they watched the footage. "The symbiote isn't killing her, it's changing her." "Into what?" one of the junior researchers asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Before anyone could hypothesize, the transformed Sophia looked directly into the camera. Her voice when she spoke carried the same layered resonance that Eliza's would later develop. "We are the future," she said, her unnaturally wide smile revealing sharpened teeth. "Join us or perish in the coming cleanse." With inhuman strength, she then punched through the reinforced door of her containment cell and disappeared into the depths of the facility. What followed was chaos. Security teams cornered Sophia in the central laboratory complex, but not before she had smashed open additional symbiote samples, releasing them into the ventilation system. Emergency containment doors sealed automatically, trapping researchers in different sections of the facility. Marcus and Eliza found themselves rushing toward Containment Lab 7, where the primary symbiote cultures were still secured. If they could be protected, there might still be hope of understanding and controlling the organism. They arrived to find the lab in disarray, but the primary containment chamber intact. As they worked to secure it, the facility AI announced, "Warning, airborne symbiote particles detected in the Containment Lab 7. Exposure risk critical." Eliza looked up at the ventilation grate above them, where a faint mist was visible. "Marcus, we need to evacuate, now." Piricum, but as they turned toward the exit, Sophia, or the creature she had become, appeared in the doorway, blocking their escape. "The cycle continues," she said, her voice eerily calm despite her monstrous appearance. "Earth purifies itself. The weak species dies. The strong evolves. It has happened 5 times before on this planet. The 6th extinction will birth something greater." "Sophia, whatever you think the symbiote is telling you," Marcus began. "Telling?" She laughed, the sound inhuman. "We are not separate entities communicating. We are becoming one. as all human consciousness must merge with the greater awareness. She moved with blinding speed, knocking Marcus aside and grabbing Eliza by the throat. You should understand better than anyone. You've studied them longer than you know. Eliza struggled against her grip. What are you talking about? Your dreams, Sophia hissed. The voices from the deep. They've been calling to you for years, since the first samples were secretly recovered a decade ago. Marcus saw something flash across Eliza's face. Recognition, fear, denial. Before he could intervene, facility security burst into the lab, firing tranquilizer rounds at Sophia. She released Eliza and turned on them with terrifying speed. In the chaos that followed, the primary containment chamber was damaged. As alarms blared and security engaged the transformed Sophia, Marcus saw Eliza move toward the leaking symbiote culture, her expression transfixed. "Eliza, don't!" he shouted, lunging toward her. Too late. Whether by accident or deliberate choice, her hand came into contact with the exposed symbiote. Unlike the mist from the ventilation system, this was a concentrated dose, direct contact with the primary culture. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and strange exhilaration. "I can hear them," she whispered, "all of them, calling across time." Then she collapsed, the transformation already beginning. That was 2 hours before our story began. 2 hours before Marcus found himself face to face with what Eliza was becoming. 2 hours before he made the decision that would change both their fates forever. The service tunnels beneath Threshold Research Facility were designed for maintenance, not escape. Narrow, dimly lit passages wound through the bedrock like concrete veins, carrying power cables and data lines to the complex above. Marcus navigated them from memory, Eliza's unconscious form draped over his shoulder. Her body was lighter than it should have been, yet oddly dense, as if her mass had been redistributed rather than reduced. The transformation had altered her at a fundamental level. The sedative wouldn't last long. Already he could feel her stirring, small movements that suggested the alien consciousness was fighting its way back to the surface. He needed to find somewhere secure before she woke. His access card opened a maintenance door leading to an abandoned monitoring station for the facility's geothermal system. It was little more than a reinforced concrete room with basic equipment, but it would provide temporary shelter. Marcus gently laid Eliza on the floor and secured the door behind them. Taking a moment to catch his breath, he studied her transformed appearance under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Up close, the changes were even more profound than he had first realized. Her skin had taken on a chitinous quality, still recognizably skin, but with a blue-black iridescence that suggested an exoskeletal component. The protrusions from her forehead and jaw appeared to be forming a symmetrical pattern, like ornamental armor rather than random growths. Most disturbing were her hands, now ending in obsidian-like claws that seemed capable of slicing through steel. Yet beneath these alien features, Eliza was still recognizable. The curve of her cheekbones, the shape of her lips, altered but present, as if her humanity was being incorporated rather than erased. "What are you becoming?" he whispered, brushing a strand of hair, now strangely metallic in texture, from her face. Her eyes snapped open, luminous yellow orbs fixing on him with predatory focus. Before he could react, she had him pinned against the wall, one clawed hand at his throat, a mirror of their earlier confrontation. "Fascinating," she said, her voice that unsettling blend of Eliza's familiar tones and something other. "Your concern for this vessel overrides your self-preservation." "Eliza," Marcus choked out, "I know you're still in there." The creature tilted its head, studying him with alien curiosity. "The Eliza consciousness persists. Yes, it is. Resistant to full integration. Because of you." The last words carried a hint of accusation. "Let me speak to her," Marcus pleaded. The transformed Eliza considered this for a moment, then released him. He slumped against the wall, massaging his throat. "Inefficient communication method," the creature muttered, pacing the small room with fluid, inhuman grace. "Single consciousness entities are so limited." Then, like a switch being flipped, Eliza's familiar expressions returned to her transformed face. The yellow eyes softened, filling with recognition and horror as she looked down at her altered hands. "Oh God," she whispered. "Marcus, what's happening to me?" He approached her cautiously. "The symbiote is changing you, integrating with your cellular structure, but you're fighting it, maintaining your consciousness despite the transformation." "Not fighting," she corrected, her scientific mind apparently still functioning despite her terror. "Negotiating. It's intelligent, Marcus. Not like us, but aware. It communicates through biochemical exchanges that trigger neural responses, like having another voice in my head, but with emotions and images instead of words." "What does it want?" Marcus asked, struggling to comprehend. Eliza's expression became distant, as if listening to an internal conversation. "Survival, evolution, it's ancient, part of a planetary consciousness that has guided Earth's evolutionary leaps for billions of years. The great extinctions, the sudden evolutionary advances, they weren't random, they were directed." "By these symbiotes?" Marcus asked incredulously. "They're catalysts," Eliza explained, her voice taking on the passionate quality it always held when she made a scientific breakthrough. "Designed to emerge during planetary crisis points to guide evolution toward forms that can survive the changing conditions." Her expression darkened. "And we're at a crisis point now." "Kanmari." "Climate change," Marcus said, understanding dawning. "That's what Sophia meant about the coming cleanse." Eliza nodded grimly. "The symbiotes have determined that humanity in its current form cannot survive the environmental changes we've set in motion. So they're offering an alternative, transformation into a hybrid species that can. At the cost of our humanity," Marcus said. "That's just it," Eliza replied, her transformed features animated with a familiar intensity. "I don't think it has to be. The symbiote is adaptive. It responds to the host consciousness. Sophia welcomed it completely, surrendered to it. But I'm maintaining a dialogue, establishing boundaries." She looked down at her clawed hands. "I think the physical changes can be negotiated, controlled." Before Marcus could respond, Eliza gasped, doubling over in pain. "It's coming back," she hissed. "The other consciousness, stronger this time." "Fight it," Marcus urged, gripping her shoulders. "Like you said, negotiate." Her yellow eyes met his, fear and determination mingling in their alien glow. "Find others," she managed to say as her voice began to distort. "Others who can maintain balance, before Sophia implements her version of—" The rest of her sentence was lost as her body convulsed. When she straightened, Marcus knew immediately that Eliza was no longer in control. The predatory intelligence had returned to her eyes. "Your species resists collective consciousness," the symbiote said through Eliza's lips, circling him with unnerving grace. "Yet you form pair bonds of surprising strength. This vessel's connection to you creates complications." "She has a name," Marcus said firmly, "and she's not your vessel. She's my colleague, my friend." He hesitated, then added, "The woman I love." The creature stopped, head tilting as if processing this information. "Love," it repeated, the word awkward in its multi-layered voice. "A neurochemical state that overrides logical decision-making, inefficient for survival." "On the contrary," Marcus countered, an idea forming. "Love is evolutionary. It ensures we protect others beyond our immediate genetic interests. It builds communities, civilizations. Civilizations that have brought this planet to crisis?" The symbiote responded dismissively. "And civilizations that might solve it," Marcus insisted. "If you're truly interested in evolution, in survival, then work with us, not by erasing who we are, but by enhancing what we could be." The symbiote stopped its predatory circling, studying him with those unnerving yellow eyes. "An alliance?" it asked, seeming to test the concept. "A true symbiosis," Marcus confirmed. "Mutual benefit, shared evolution." For a long moment, the creature was silent, its alien features unreadable. Then, to Marcus's surprise, it nodded slowly. "The Eliza consciousness proposes similar terms," it said. "A cooperative integration rather than subjugation." The symbiote's head tilted again, considering. "It is not how we have traditionally guided evolution, but adaptation is our nature. Before Marcus could respond, the door to their sanctuary exploded inward. Facility security poured through the opening, weapons raised, but they weren't alone. Behind them stood Sofia Vargas, now even more dramatically transformed than Eliza, her body an armored carapace of blue-black chitin with multiple horn-like protrusions forming a crown around her head. "Betrayal!" Sofia hissed, her yellow eyes flaring with anger as she took in the scene. "You would corrupt the Great Awakening with half measures and compromise." The symbiote controlling Eliza's body shifted stance, placing itself between Marcus and the new threat. "The human consciousness offers insights we have not considered," it replied. "Alternative integration methodologies that may prove more efficient." "Weakness," Sofia spat. "Their individual consciousness is the flaw that must be purged. The collective is all." She gestured to the security team, and Marcus realized with horror that they too showed signs of infection. Their eyes beginning to glow yellow, their movements becoming synchronized in a way that suggested shared consciousness. "She's controlling them," he whispered. "A hive mind." "Not control," the symbiote within Eliza corrected. "Consumption. Their individual consciousness has been subsumed." Sofia smiled, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "As all will be, the Earth will cleanse itself of the human plague, leaving only those who accept the next stage of evolution." The standoff was interrupted by the facility AI. "Warning, containment failure in main laboratory complex. Symbiote dispersion at critical levels. Facility self-destruct sequence has been initiated by remote override. 12 minutes to detonation." Sofia's alien features twisted in rage. "Humans," she snarled, "always destroying what they fear." She turned to her enthralled security team. "Secure the primary symbiote cultures. I will deal with the traitors." As the infected guards retreated, Sofia lunged forward with inhuman speed, claws extended toward Marcus. But Eliza, or the symbiote within her, moved even faster, intercepting the attack. The two transformed women collided with bone-jarring force, sending shockwaves through the small room. "Run!" Eliza's voice broke through briefly as she grappled with the more heavily transformed Sofia. "Find Yamamoto. He knows about the stabilization compound." Marcus hesitated, unwilling to leave her. "Go!" Both Eliza and the symbiote seemed to shout in unison, their voices harmonizing in a way that suggested momentary, perfect integration. Taking advantage of the distraction, Marcus slipped past the battling figures and into the corridor beyond. Behind him, the sounds of inhuman combat echoed, screeching metal, cracking concrete, and roars that no human throat could produce. The facility was in chaos. Emergency lights flashed as researchers and security personnel rushed toward evacuation points. Through windows and security feeds, Marcus caught glimpses of the spreading infection. Some staff already showing early signs of transformation, others barricading themselves in secure areas. Navigating the mayhem, he made his way to Dr. Yamamoto's private laboratory. The door was sealed but yielded to Marcus's override code. Inside, he found the cellular biologist hunched over a centrifuge, his movements urgent. "Yamamoto!" Marcus called. "Eliza said you were working on a stabilization compound?" The scientist looked up, relief washing over his features. "Reid, thank God. I was afraid everyone else was already infected or evacuated." He gestured to the centrifuge. "It's theoretical, based on the little we've learned about the symbiote's cellular integration process. It might allow controlled symbiosis without complete transformation or loss of human consciousness." "How close are you?" "Minutes away," Yamamoto replied, checking the timer on the centrifuge. "But we have a bigger problem. The symbiote dispersion isn't just happening here. Sofia uploaded our research to Ecogenesis before she transformed. They're planning simultaneous releases at major population centers worldwide." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "A coordinated extinction event. Followed by guided evolution?" Yamamoto confirmed grimly. "Only those who accept complete surrender to the collective consciousness would survive." The facility AI interrupted. 7 minutes to detonation. All personnel must evacuate immediately." Yamamoto gestured to the centrifuge. "The stabilization compound needs to be synthesized and distributed globally before Sophia's plan can be implemented. It won't prevent transformation, but it might allow humans to maintain their individual consciousness while adapting to the symbiote integration. Ha, co-evolution instead of replacement, Marcus murmured. Then making a decision, he asked, "What do you need to complete it?" "Time we don't have," Yamamoto said, frustration evident in his voice, "and access to the primary symbiote culture for the final bonding catalyst." As if on cue, the laboratory door burst inward. Both men spun to face the intrusion, expecting Sophia or her infected security team. Instead, Eliza stood in the doorway, her transformation more advanced than before, yet somehow more harmonious. The alien features seemed less like an invasion of her human form and more like an enhancement, integrated rather than imposed. "Eliza?" Marcus asked cautiously. She nodded, her luminous eyes softer than before. "We've reached an understanding," she said, her voice still carrying that otherworldly resonance, but now blended more naturally with her human tones. "Temporary alignment of purpose. We need the primary culture," Yamamoto said, eyeing her warily, "for the stabilization compound." "I know," Eliza replied. From a pouch that seemed to have formed within her transformed skin, she withdrew a sealed container holding a pulsing blue-black substance. "We retrieved this before Sophia could secure it." "We?" Marcus asked. "The symbiote and I," Eliza explained, handing the culture to Yamamoto. "Once I stopped fighting the integration and started negotiating terms, we found common ground." Yamamoto accepted the container with scientist reverence and returned to his work. 4 minutes, he muttered. "It's going to be close." "The detonation sequence can't be aborted," Eliza said, turning to Marcus. "Sophia made sure of that. But we can survive it if we complete the transformation." "Transformation?" Marcus repeated. "Not like Sophia," Eliza clarified. "A balanced integration. The symbiote offers enhanced physical resilience, accelerated healing, environmental adaptation. I retain my consciousness, my identity." She touched his face with a transformed hand that was somehow gentle, despite its alien appearance. "It can work, Marcus. It's not an invasion. It's an upgrade." The facility AI broke in. 3 minutes to detonation. Evacuation routes are now compromised. Facility lockdown complete. "It's ready," Yamamoto announced, holding up a vial of iridescent liquid. "The stabilization compound. It should allow controlled integration while preserving human consciousness." "Should?" Marcus asked. Yamamoto gave a strained smile. "Theoretical, remember? Someone needs to test it." Before either of them could respond, the laboratory wall exploded inward. Sophia stood in the breach, now transformed almost beyond recognition. A nightmare creature of armored chitin and predatory grace. Behind her, a dozen fully converted humans moved with synchronized precision. "The compound," she hissed, fixing her gaze on the vial in Yamamoto's hand. "Destroy it." As her converted soldiers surged forward, Eliza moved with inhuman speed to intercept them. The laboratory became a battlefield of transformed humans, equipment shattering as combatants were thrown across the room with supernatural force. In the chaos, Yamamoto pressed the vial into Marcus's hand. "Take it and go. The world needs this more than we need to survive." A transformed guard lunged toward them. Yamamoto shoved Marcus aside, placing himself between the threat and the precious compound. The guard's claws tore through the scientist's chest as Marcus stumbled backward in horror. "Run!" Eliza shouted as she grappled with 2 of Sophia's converts. Her transformed body moved with fluid grace, her newfound strength matching theirs, but she was outnumbered. The facility AI's voice seemed distant now. 1 minute to detonation. Decision time. Marcus looked at the vial in his hand, then at Eliza fighting against impossible odds. In that moment, he made his choice. He uncapped the vial and drank half its contents. The effect was immediate and excruciating. Liquid fire spread through his veins as the stabilized symbiote entered his bloodstream. He fell to his knees, every cell in his body seeming to tear apart and reconstruct itself simultaneously. Through the haze of agony, he saw Sophia stalking toward him, her alien features twisted in rage. "You cannot stop the cleansing," she hissed. "The weak will fall. The strong will evolve. The collective will triumph. Not your version, Marcus gasped as the transformation raced through him. His skin hardened, darkened, strength flooding his muscles even as pain threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. Unlike Eliza's crown-like protrusions, his transformation manifested as ridge-like structures along his jawline and forearms, defensive rather than ornamental. With newfound strength, he lunged to his feet and hurled the remaining contents of the vial at Sophia. The liquid splashed across her transformed face, sizzling on contact. She screamed, a sound that shattered remaining glass in the laboratory as the stabilization compound interfered with her complete symbiosis. The collective consciousness faltered, confusion rippling through her converted soldiers. "What have you done?" she shrieked, clawing at her face as the compound began to isolate sections of her symbiote integration. "Given them back their individuality?" Marcus said, his voice now carrying the same multi-layered resonance as Eliza's, but distinctly his own. The facility AI made its final announcement. Detonation imminent. 10 seconds. 9. Eliza fought her way to Marcus's side, her transformed hand finding his. "Do you trust me?" she asked, yellow eyes meeting his now similarly transformed gaze. "Always," he replied. "Then jump." She gestured to the laboratory's external window, 60 feet above the rocky coastline below. 3, 2, 1. The world exploded into fire and concussive force as they crashed through the window, transformed bodies plummeting toward the churning ocean below. The symbiotes within them worked frantically to reinforce their cellular structures, preparing for impact. They hit the water with force that would have killed ordinary humans instantly. Instead, they simply sank, transformed lungs automatically adapting to extract oxygen directly from the seawater. Beneath the waves, they watched as the Threshold research facility collapsed in on itself. Secondary explosions, consuming what remained of humanity's first contact with the symbiotes, and what would have been Sophia's launch point for global transformation, but not the end of the threat. Ecogenesis still had Sophia's research data. The extinction event was merely delayed, not prevented. 3 months later, a coastal village in northern Japan reported a strange phenomenon. 2 figures, neither fully human nor wholly other, emerged from the sea at dawn. Their skin held an iridescent blue-black sheen. Their eyes glowed with amber light, and elegant protrusions of chitin armor adorned their forms in patterns, both beautiful and terrifying. Yet they spoke with human voices and human compassion as they sought out Dr. Haru Ishikawa, the world's leading expert on environmental adaptation and Yamamoto's former mentor. "We bring a warning," Eliza said, her transformed features arranged in a very human expression of urgency. "And a solution." Ishikawa, to his credit, listened without reaching for the alarm or weapon hidden beneath his desk as the transformed pair explained everything. The symbiotes, their evolutionary purpose, Sophia's planned extinction event, and the stabilization compound that offered a third path. "So these organisms believe humanity cannot survive the coming environmental collapse," Ishikawa summarized, studying the vial of stabilization compound they had recreated from memory. "And their solution is to transform us. Their traditional approach is replacement, not coexistence," Marcus explained. Sophia embraced that vision, the elimination of individual human consciousness in favor of a collective guided by the symbiote intelligence. "But there's another way," Eliza continued. "Controlled integration. Humanity evolves with symbiote assistance, maintains individual consciousness, and gains the adaptations needed to survive what's coming." "Voluntary transformation," Ishikawa mused, examining their altered forms with scientific curiosity. "You've maintained your human identities despite extensive physical changes. The stabilization compound is key," Marcus said. "It allows the human consciousness to remain dominant while accepting beneficial adaptations. A negotiated evolution rather than conquest." Ishikawa leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "And you want me to help distribute this compound globally before this ecogenesis group releases the unstabilized symbiotes?" "We need to give humanity a choice," Eliza said earnestly. "Transformation with consciousness preserved, or transformation with consciousness subsumed, or Or extinction, Ishikawa finished for her. As our environment becomes increasingly hostile to human life as we currently exist, he studied them thoughtfully. Your changes, they allow you to survive conditions that would kill unmodified humans? In answer, Marcus placed his transformed hand directly into the flame of Ishikawa's desk candle. The fire licked harmlessly against his chitinous skin. Temperature extremes, radiation, toxins, pathogens, all neutralize. Cellular regeneration accelerated by approximately 400%. Oxygen efficiency increased even more dramatically. And the cost? Ishikawa asked, the scientist in him needing all variables. We're still discovering them, Eliza admitted. Increased caloric requirements, heightened sensory input that can be overwhelming, social isolation, obviously. Her transformed features softened into a sad smile. We're the prototype for a new branch of evolution. There will be unexpected adaptations. Ishikawa was silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. Finally, he asked, if I help you, what exactly is your plan? Marcus and Eliza exchanged glances, their luminous eyes communicating in ways that transcended human expression. First, Marcus said, we need to locate and neutralize the ecogenesis threat before they can implement Sophia's plan. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for coordinated releases in major population centers within the month. Then, Eliza continued, we need to establish protocols for voluntary transformation using the stabilized compound. Controlled, ethical implementation with full disclosure of risks and benefits. And research, Marcus added. The symbiotes have existed on Earth for millions of years, guiding evolution through multiple extinction events. The scientific knowledge alone is invaluable. Ishikawa nodded slowly. You realize what you're proposing will change humanity forever. Hell, humanity has always changed, Eliza countered gently. That's evolution. The question is whether we direct that change or let it happen to us. The symbiotes aren't inherently malevolent, Marcus explained. They're ancient facilitators of adaptation. Sophia's collective consciousness approach represents just one evolutionary path they've implemented in the past. And your approach? Ishikawa asked. Individual consciousness preserved within transformed bodies? Is something new, Eliza acknowledged. An experiment, a potential path forward that preserves what makes us human while adapting to a changing world. Ishikawa stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the ocean that had delivered these harbingers of evolutionary change to his doorstep. If I were a religious man, he said quietly, I might see this as either salvation or apocalypse. Perhaps it's both, Marcus suggested. The end of humanity as we've known it, the beginning of what we might become. Turning back to face them, Ishikawa made his decision. I will help you, but not just to distribute your compound. We need to understand these symbiotes completely. Their biology, psychology, intentions. If humanity is to evolve, it should be with eyes wide open. Eliza smiled, her transformed features somehow conveying profound relief despite their alien aspects. That's why we came to you, Doctor. Science before faith, understanding before action. As they solidified their plans, none of them noticed the small drone hovering outside Ishikawa's window, its camera transmitting everything to a secure facility thousands of miles away, where Sofia Vargas, now recovered from her encounter with the stabilization compound, watched with alien eyes. So, she murmured, her transformed features set in a predatory smile, the betrayers seek allies. Toi. She turned to the dozens of fully converted humans attending her, their movements synchronized with hers, their consciousness subsumed into the collective. Prepare the accelerated release. If they want to give humanity a choice, we must ensure they have none. The evolutionary war for Earth's future had begun. 1 year later, the world was unrecognizable. From space, the planet appeared largely unchanged. Blue oceans, swirling cloud patterns, the familiar continents of human geography. But on the surface, Earth had become a battleground between two visions of evolution. In regions where Sophia's Ecogenesis Collective had successfully released the unstabilized symbiotes, transformation had been swift and absolute. Urban centers became hive-like structures of organic architecture. former humans now fully integrated into a collective consciousness guided by the symbiote intelligence. Individual identity was sacrificed for perfect efficiency, biological uniformity, and shared purpose. In contrast, areas that had implemented Marcus and Eliza's stabilization protocols showed a different kind of transformation. Humans retained their individual consciousness while accepting varying degrees of physical adaptation. Some embraced minimal changes, enhanced immune systems, improved cellular regeneration, resistance to environmental toxins. Others opted for more comprehensive transformation, their bodies becoming similar to Marcus and Eliza's hybrid forms, adapted to thrive in the increasingly hostile climate. Between these regions lay contested zones, devastated urban centers, abandoned industrial complexes, and wilderness reclaimed by both factions for their own purposes. It was in one such zone, the ruins of what had once been Seattle, that Marcus and Eliza established their research compound. The latest atmospheric readings are concerning, Dr. Ishikawa reported during their weekly assessment. The elderly scientist had undergone minimal transformation, just enough to counteract his age-related cellular degeneration and enhance his cognitive functions. Carbon dioxide levels continue to rise despite the collective's aggressive carbon sequestration projects. They're focusing on the wrong problem, Eliza said, studying the holographic display of global climate data. Her transformed appearance had stabilized over the past year, still clearly hybrid, but with an elegance that suggested evolutionary refinement rather than monstrous alteration. Methane released from the Arctic permafrost is the immediate threat. Our predictive models show a potential runaway greenhouse effect within decades. Marcus nodded grimly, which is why the collective is pushing for more complete transformations. Their fully converted forms can survive conditions that would kill even our partially transformed volunteers. At the cost of everything that makes us human, Ishikawa countered, individual consciousness, creativity, choice, the collective sacrifices it all for mere survival. Survival is a compelling argument, came a familiar voice from the doorway. They turned to find Sophia standing there, or rather, what Sophia had become. Her transformation had progressed far beyond even their most extreme adaptations. Her body was now an intricate lattice of chitinous armor and iridescent membranes, elongated limbs arranged with unsettling asymmetry. Multiple yellow eyes blinked independently across what had once been a human face. Marcus moved protectively in front of Ishikawa, his transformed body tensing for conflict. "How did you get past our security?" "Your guards recognized evolutionary superiority when they saw it," Sophia replied, her voice now a harmonic chorus of multiple tones. "They've joined the collective willingly." "What do you want?" Eliza demanded, her own transformed features hardening in response to the threat. "To offer you one final opportunity to see reason," Sophia said, moving into the room with liquid grace that defied human biomechanics. "Your stabilization approach is failing. The climate collapse accelerates. Your transformed humans retain too much of their original nature, including their capacity for denial, their emotional irrationality, their individualistic fragmentation. And your collective is the answer?" Marcus asked skeptically. "Look at what we've accomplished in 1 year," Sophia countered. "The collective regions have reduced carbon emissions to zero, organic architecture that sequesters carbon rather than producing it, perfect resource distribution without waste, no crime, no conflict, no competition, no freedom," Ishikawa added quietly, "no innovation born of diverse perspectives, no art for art's sake." Sophia's alien features arranged themselves in what might have been pity. Such human concerns, irrelevant to survival. "They're what makes survival meaningful," Eliza argued. "Your collective exists. It doesn't live. Philosophy will not save your transformed humans when the methane levels trigger catastrophic temperature increases," Sophia said dismissively. "Only complete adaptation will suffice." She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show new climate models, more extreme than their own projections, showing global temperature increases of up to 10 degrees Celsius within years rather than decades. "Your data is flawed," Ishikawa said, but his voice lacked conviction as he studied the models. "Our data is complete," Sophia corrected. The collective mind includes thousands of the world's leading climate scientists, their knowledge now perfectly integrated rather than fragmented by ego and academic competition. Marcus and Eliza exchanged troubled glances. If Sophia's models were accurate, even their transformed humans might not be sufficiently adapted for what was coming. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked carefully. "Merge your faction with ours," Sophia said simply. "Bring your transformed humans into the collective. Your stabilization compound was a noble experiment, but the time for half measures has passed." "And if we refuse?" Eliza challenged. Sophia's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "Then you condemn your followers to extinction. The collective will survive what's coming. Your individualists will not." Without waiting for their response, she turned to leave, her inhuman body flowing toward the exit with unsettling fluidity. At the doorway, she paused. "You have 1 week to decide. After that, we implement the Ascension Protocol globally." After she had gone, the three researchers stood in troubled silence. "Could she be right?" Ishikawa finally asked, still studying the disturbing climate projections. "Have we underestimated the timeline?" "It's possible," Eliza admitted. "The symbiotes have been monitoring Earth's climate cycles for millions of years. Their predictive models would be based on comprehensive data we've never had access to." "So what do we do?" Marcus asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Accept her terms? Surrender our consciousness to the collective?" "No," Eliza said firmly. "But we need to accelerate our adaptation research. If more extreme climate change is coming sooner than we projected, our transformed humans need to be prepared." "There's another option," Ishikawa said quietly. Both Marcus and Eliza turned to him in surprise. The elder scientist rarely proposed solutions, preferring to analyze and refine their ideas. "The symbiotes evolved to guide adaptation during extinction events," he continued, "but they're also highly adaptive themselves. What if we could modify the stabilization compound to enhance the symbiotes' environmental restoration capabilities without sacrificing human consciousness?" "You're suggesting we try to change the symbiotes rather than just letting them change us," Marcus said, grasping the concept immediately. "Evolutionary symbiosis rather than replacement or mere coexistence," Ishikawa confirmed. "If successful, transformed humans could actively repair environmental damage at a cellular level, each individual becoming not just adapted to survive climate change, but to reverse it." "The symbiotes might resist," Eliza cautioned. "They followed the same evolutionary protocols for millions of years." "But they're also pragmatists," Marcus countered, excitement building. "If we can demonstrate a more efficient approach to planetary survival, they might accept it, even within our stabilized consciousness-preserving framework." For the first time in months, hope flickered in the research compound. If they could evolve the evolutionary guides themselves, humanity might find a third path. Neither extinction nor the surrender of consciousness to the collective, but a new kind of existence that preserved what made them human while transcending human limitations. It would be their most dangerous experiment yet, and with Sophia's 1-week deadline, they had no time to waste. The enhanced stabilization compound was ready with hours to spare before Sophia's deadline. Testing had been minimal, computer simulations and limited trials on volunteer cell cultures. But the results were promising. The modified symbiotes appeared to develop enhanced environmental interaction capabilities without compromising the host's neural autonomy. "It's ready," Eliza announced, carefully transferring the iridescent blue liquid into an aerosol distribution system. "As ready as it can be, given the time constraints." Marcus studied the compound, his transformed features set in worried concentration. "We should test it on ourselves first. If something goes wrong, then no one else will be affected," Eliza agreed, already preparing an injection. Dr. Ishikawa observed with concern. "We don't know how the modified symbiotes will interact with your already stabilized integration. The risk is considerable." "So is extinction," Marcus replied grimly. "If Sophia's climate models are accurate, we're out of time for caution." Eliza administered the modified compound to herself first, then to Marcus. For several agonizing minutes, nothing appeared to happen. Then simultaneously, they both gasped as the new symbiote modifications took effect. The sensation was unlike either their initial transformation or any subsequent adaptation. It felt like their awareness was expanding, not just beyond their bodies, but into the environment itself. Molecular structures became visible to their enhanced perception. Chemical processes in the air, soil, and water around them registered as complex patterns of energy and matter. "It's working," Eliza whispered, staring at her hands as microfilaments of symbiote material extended from her fingertips, interacting directly with the carbon dioxide molecules in the air, restructuring them into oxygen and carbon compounds that were reabsorbed into her transformed skin. Marcus held up a vial of polluted water from their test samples. As he submerged his transformed hand, the contaminants visibly separated from the water molecules, broken down and neutralized by his enhanced symbiote integration. "This goes beyond adaptation," he said in awe. "This is active environmental restoration on a cellular level." Dr. Ishikawa monitored their vital signs with growing excitement. "Your symbiotes are performing environmental functions automatically, without conscious direction. Imagine this capability multiplied by millions of transformed humans. We could reverse climate change within years rather than centuries," Eliza realized. Each transformed human becomes an environmental restoration system. Their celebration was interrupted by the facility's security alert. Surveillance feeds showed multiple collective converted humans approaching from all directions, led by Sophia in her increasingly inhuman form. "They're here for our answer," Marcus said grimly, "and we'll give it to them," Eliza replied with newfound determination. "Not surrender, but a better solution." They met Sophia at the compound's main entrance, their newly enhanced symbiote integration still adapting, still evolving in response to the modified compound. "Your deadline arrives," Sophia announced, her chorus of voices echoing across the contested zone. Behind her, hundreds of fully converted humans moved with synchronized precision, their collective consciousness united in purpose. "What is your decision? Ascension or extinction?" Marcus stepped forward. "Neither. We've developed a third option." Sophia's multiple eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Explain." "Enhanced environmental integration," Eliza said, demonstrating by extending her hand toward the polluted soil beneath Sophia's feet. The onlookers watched in astonishment as the contaminated ground visibly changed, toxins breaking down, nutrient balances restoring, microscopic life reactivating. "Individual transformation with collective purpose," Marcus continued. "Each transformed human becomes an environmental restoration system, maintaining their consciousness while addressing the planetary crisis directly." Sophia studied the demonstration with unreadable alien features. The collective consciousness she represented processed the implications within human speed. "Interesting," she finally said, "but insufficient. Your approach lacks scale. Individual action cannot match collective efficiency." "Then we'll show you," Eliza challenged. 1 week. Give us 1 week to demonstrate the effectiveness of our enhanced integration on a larger scale." Sophia seemed to consult with the collective consciousness, her alien body unnaturally still during the internal deliberation. Finally, she responded, 3 days. You may implement your enhancement within the Seattle contested zone only. If the environmental metrics show significant improvement, we will consider your alternative." Her voice hardened. "If they do not, the Ascension Protocol proceeds globally, and your resistance ends." Without waiting for their agreement, she turned and departed, her collective followers moving in perfect unison behind her. 3 days to prove we can save the world," Ishikawa said quietly. "No pressure." The enhanced stabilization compound was distributed to their transformed human allies throughout the Seattle contested zone. Each volunteer understood the risks. The modified symbiotes represented uncharted evolutionary territory, but they also recognized the stakes. This was humanity's last stand against both extinction and the loss of individual consciousness. The effects became visible within hours. Transformed humans with the enhanced integration developed unique environmental restoration abilities based on their location and the specific challenges present. Those near polluted waterways found their symbiotes specializing in water purification. Those in areas with contaminated soil developed enhanced remediation capabilities. Those in zones with air quality problems became living air filtration systems. Most remarkably, the transformed humans began to coordinate naturally, not through a hive mind like Sophia's collective, but through a form of environmental awareness that allowed them to sense where their abilities were most needed. It was collaboration without loss of self, purpose without surrender of identity. By the second day, satellite imagery showed visible changes to the Seattle contested zone. Waterways ran clearer. Dead zones in the harbor showed signs of marine life returning. The persistent toxic haze that had hung over the region for decades began to dissipate. "It's working better than we projected," Ishikawa reported, analyzing the environmental data with increasing excitement. The enhanced symbiotes appear to be communicating with each other across host individuals, creating a distributed environmental restoration network without compromising individual consciousness. "A neural network rather than a hive mind," Marcus observed. "Each transformed human remains autonomous, but connected through environmental awareness." Eliza, who had been quieter than usual, suddenly looked up from her own transformed hands. "There's something else happening," she said slowly. "Something we didn't anticipate." Before she could elaborate, their monitoring systems detected a massive approach of collective, converted humans, far more than had accompanied Sophia previously. Surveillance drones showed thousands converging on the Seattle contested zone from all directions. "They're not waiting for the 3-day trial to end," Marcus realized. "They're moving to stop us now." "Because we're succeeding," Eliza said with sudden clarity. "The enhanced integration threatens the collective's evolutionary approach. If our method proves superior, the entire basis of Sophia's ascension becomes questionable." They rushed to the compound's roof to observe the approaching threat directly. What they saw confirmed their fears. A veritable army of fully converted humans moving toward the contested zone with single-minded purpose. At their center was Sophia, her transformation now so advanced that she barely resembled anything humanoid. Her body had become a towering structure of chitin and membrane, multiple limbs extending from a central mass, her numerous eyes glowing with alien intensity. "She's become their nexus," Ishikawa said in horrified fascination. "The central node of the collective consciousness. And their greatest vulnerability," Eliza added, that same strange awareness in her voice. "The collective may be distributed, but it's hierarchical. Sophia's form has evolved to maintain central control." Marcus looked at her sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "The enhanced symbiotes aren't just restoring the environment," Eliza explained. "They're communicating with all symbiotes, including those in the collective. And they're offering an alternative to both approaches." "What alternative?" Ishikawa asked. Before Eliza could answer, the air around them seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. The approaching collective forces halted simultaneously, as if listening to an inaudible command. Sophia's massive form convulsed, multiple limbs thrashing as she fought against some invisible influence. "What are you doing?" her chorus of voices demanded, the harmonics distorted with effort. Eliza stepped to the edge of the roof, looking down at the arrested collective with compassion rather than triumph. "It's not us," she said softly. "It's the symbiotes themselves. They're evolving beyond both our approaches." As if in response to her words, a ripple passed through the collective forces. One by one, the fully converted humans began to change, their rigid, uniform appearances shifting, individualizing. The hive mind's synchronization faltered, replaced by individual movements, individual awareness returning to transformed features. "Impossible," Sophia hissed, her massive form fighting against the change sweeping through her followers. "The collective cannot be fragmented. The evolutionary protocol is absolute." "Evolution itself evolves," Marcus said, understanding dawning as he felt the same changes within his own enhanced symbiote integration. "The symbiotes are adapting based on the results of both our approaches." Dr. Ishikawa's monitoring equipment registered the phenomenon with rapidly scrolling data. "It's a spontaneous neural network formation," he reported incredulously. "The symbiotes are establishing a new form of connection between individual hosts but without consciousness subsumption." On the ground below, the formerly collective-controlled humans were now moving independently, examining their transformed bodies with the wonder of renewed self-awareness. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the return of individual consciousness after months of collective subsumption. Only Sophia remained unchanged, her massive form now isolated from the collective she had led. "This is regression, not evolution," she raged, multiple limbs lashing out at her former followers as they backed away from her. Weakness returning, inefficiency, chaos. "Not chaos," Eliza called down to her. "Complexity. The symbiotes have learned what we discovered, that human consciousness, with all its messy individuality, creates adaptive advantages through diversity of thought and approach." Marcus stepped forward. "Sophia, the symbiotes have made their choice. They're integrating our approaches. Individual consciousness with collective environmental purpose. Join us. Return to yourself without losing what you've gained." For a moment, it seemed Sophia might consider their offer. Her massive form stilled, multiple eyes blinking in sequence as if processing this new reality. Then, with a shriek that shattered windows throughout the compound, she lunged toward the building with terrifying speed. "If the symbiotes will not adhere to evolutionary protocol," her distorted voices proclaimed, "then they must be reset. The primary host must be eliminated." Marcus realized with horror that she was targeting Eliza, recognizing her somehow as the focal point of the symbiote's new evolutionary direction. Before he could move to intervene, transformed humans from both factions converged on Sophia, their newly networked awareness recognizing the threat she posed. What followed was unlike any combat humanity had ever witnessed. Dozens of transformed humans, each with unique adaptations, coordinated their efforts against Sophia's monstrous form. They moved not with hive mind synchronization, but with complementary individual actions, a symphony of diverse responses to a common threat. Sophia fought with the desperate fury of evolutionary extinction, her massive form destroying transformed humans by the dozen. But for each one that fell, others adapted, learning from the collective experience transmitted through the symbiotic network without losing their individual agency. The battle raged across the contested zone, devastating the recovering landscape. From their vantage point, Marcus, Eliza, and Ishikawa watched with a mixture of horror and hope as the newly evolving symbiotic network fought for its right to exist. "We need to end this," Eliza said urgently. "Every moment of conflict undoes the environmental restoration we've achieved." "How?" Marcus asked. "Sophia won't surrender, and she's too powerful for direct confrontation." Eliza's transformed features set in determination. "The enhanced symbiotes have shown us a third path. Now we need to offer that same path to Sophia, not through force, but through connection." Before Marcus could stop her, Eliza leapt from the roof, her transformed body easily absorbing the impact of the fall. She moved with purposeful grace toward the chaotic battlefield where Sophia continued to rage against the inevitable. "Eliza, wait!" Marcus called, immediately following her descent. Ishikawa remained on the roof, monitoring the situation through his equipment, his partially transformed body unable to withstand the conflict below. Eliza approached the battle with unwavering focus, transformed humans recognizing her intent and creating a path through the chaos. At its center, Sophia fought with diminishing strength against the relentless coordination of her former collective. "Sophia!" Eliza called, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate through the symbiotic network. The fighting paused momentarily as all attention turned to her. "You sought evolution without understanding its purpose," Eliza continued, moving closer to Sophia's massive wounded form. "The symbiotes didn't come to replace humanity, but to guide us through an extinction event of our own making. Not by erasing what we are, but by enhancing what we could become." "Weakness," Sophia spat, though her multiple voices now sounded uncertain. "Individual consciousness is inefficient, fragmented, vulnerable. It's also creative, diverse, and adaptable in ways the collective cannot match," Eliza countered. "The symbiotes have recognized this. That's why they're establishing a new form of connection, a neural network that preserves individual consciousness while allowing collective purpose." She extended her transformed hand toward Sophia, not in battle, but in offering. "You don't have to remain isolated. Join the network. Be yourself again, but connected to something greater." Sophia's massive form recoiled. "There is no self to return to. The Sophia consciousness was subsumed months ago." No consciousness is ever truly lost, Marcus said, joining Eliza's side. Just transformed, integrated, like the environment we're working to restore. For a long moment, Sophia remained motionless, her alien features unreadable. Then slowly, one of her many limbs extended toward Eliza's offered hand. The contact released a visible pulse of energy that rippled through every transformed human in the contested zone. Sophia's massive form began to change, not diminishing exactly, but reorganizing, the excessive mutations receding into a more balanced integration. Her multiple eyes reduced to two, still luminous yellow, but now focused, individual. When she finally spoke again, her voice was singular, still layered with symbiotic resonance, but recognizably her own. "I remember," she said wonderingly. "I remember being Sophia." "Ah." The transformed humans around them lowered their defensive postures, sensing through the symbiotic network that the threat had passed. Many approached, curious about this new evolution they had all experienced. "What happens now?" one asked, examining his transformed hands as if seeing them for the first time. "We're neither human nor collective anymore." "Now we rebuild," Eliza said, looking out at the damaged landscape of the contested zone. "We heal the world we nearly destroyed, and we discover what we're becoming together." 1 year later, Earth looked very different, both from the space and on the surface. From orbit, the most striking change was the color. Where once there had been brown expanses of deforestation and pollution, green had returned with astonishing speed. Coastal waters that had been clouded with sediment and contamination now shone clear blue. Even the atmosphere appeared cleaner, the cloud patterns more natural and less disrupted by industrial emissions. On the ground, the transformation was even more profound. Cities had not been abandoned, but reimagined. Living architecture integrated with transformed human habitation, buildings that purified air and water, processed waste into nutrients, and generated clean energy. The stark division between urban and natural environments had blurred, with forests and food production systems extending through and between human settlements. And the humans themselves, or rather what humanity had become, were the most changed of all. The enhanced symbiotic integration had stabilized into countless variations, each transformed individual developing adaptations suited to their environment and purpose. Some resembled Eliza and Marcus's original transformations, with moderate chitinous enhancements and subtle morphological changes. Others had evolved more dramatic adaptations for specific environmental restoration roles. But all retained their individual consciousness while participating in the symbiotic neural network. A constant background awareness of environmental needs and collective purpose that informed but did not override personal choice. In what had once been the Seattle contested zone, now a thriving center of the new civilization, Eliza stood on a living observation platform that had grown from the remnants of their research compound. Beside her, Marcus and a much transformed Dr. Ishikawa surveyed their creation with silent satisfaction. The Australian symbiotic collectives report complete reversal of desertification in the outback, Ishikawa noted, reviewing data through his symbiote-enhanced neural interface. And the Antarctic ice sheet stabilization is ahead of schedule. The symbiotes are adapting faster than we anticipated, Marcus added. Each generation of transformation shows more efficient environmental integration. Eliza nodded, her transformed features now a harmonious blend of human and symbiote that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her expressive capacity. "And what about the space initiatives?" "Proceeding well," came a voice behind them. They turned to see Sophia approaching, her transformed appearance now elegant rather than monstrous. Highly adapted but balanced, individual yet connected. "The Mars terraforming simulations show promise," she continued, joining them at the railing. "With symbiote-enhanced colonists, we could establish a self-sustaining biosphere within decades rather than centuries." Eliza smiled at the woman who had once been their greatest adversary and was now one of their most valuable collaborators. Sophia's unique experience with both complete collective integration and subsequent return to individual consciousness had given her insights no one else possessed. "From nearly destroying Earth to terraforming Mars," Marcus mused, "we've come a long way in 2 years." Evolution accelerated, Sophia agreed, her transformed features thoughtful. Though I sometimes wonder if this was the symbiote's purpose all along. Eliza turned to her with curiosity. What do you mean? Think about it, Sophia explained. An ancient organism that guides evolutionary leaps during planetary crises. What if Earth wasn't its first world? What if the symbiotes have been spreading through the cosmos for billions of years, preparing species for interplanetary expansion when their homeworlds face extinction? The possibility hung in the air between them, both wondrous and sobering. We may never know their origins, Ishikawa said, but their future is now bound with ours. A true symbiosis across the stars. As if in response to his words, a subtle vibration passed through the symbiotic network. Not a communication exactly, but a harmonization, a momentary alignment of purpose that connected every transformed human on the planet. It felt like anticipation, like possibility. Below their observation platform, a group of transformed children played in what had once been contaminated wasteland, now a thriving ecosystem. Their forms showed even more harmonious integration than the first generation of transformed humans. Symbiotic adaptations that appeared beautiful rather than alien. Evolutionary refinement rather than radical alteration. They'll go further than we ever could, Eliza said softly, watching the children. Born into symbiosis rather than transformed by it. Marcus took her transformed hand in his. Chitinous surfaces sliding together with perfect compatibility. Beautiful nightmares that became waking dreams, he murmured. Sophia gave them a knowing smile before departing to oversee the Mars Initiative preparations, leaving the three original architects of the new evolutionary path alone with their creation. Was it worth it? Ishikawa asked after a long silence. All the pain, the conflict, the loss of what we were? Eliza looked out at the restored world, then back at her transformed hands, no longer monstrous in her eyes, but simply evolved, adapted, the next step on humanity's endless journey. We didn't lose what we were, she answered. We found what we could become. As the sun set over the rewilded landscape, its light caught the iridescent surfaces of their transformed skin, creating patterns that seemed to shimmer between worlds, neither fully of Earth nor entirely alien. A perfect symbiosis of what had been and what might yet be. The nightmare had become beautiful indeed. The end.